we've discussed abortion on the podcast before. Leaked memo. By the time this comes out, who knows if it'll be official or done, but it looks to be official. And not a constitutional law expert, but I do remember when I learned about the Roe v. Wade case a long time ago, I remember thinking, I don't think that's in the Constitution.
Well, it's not, because when they made the Constitution,
I don't think it's in the 14th Amendment, or I feel like it was a pretty broad interpretation.
Privacy.
Yes,
that's how they got it. They said a woman's body is her own. Mm-hmm. She has a right to privacy, and that includes having an abortion. That's how they got it done.
Which was simultaneously a very broad view of the word privacy and a very narrow. So, for instance, like it didn't eliminate the selective service, which is like, my body, I have a right to privacy, but I can still be drafted.
Yeah, that trumps everything.
Which is just like
selective service trumps everything.
Well,
baby.
I'm just saying, like, do I have the right to privacy or don't I? No, you can make me go to basic training.
You always have the right to serve in the army.
Yeah. So anyway, it was simultaneously an incredibly broad interpretation and then an incredibly narrow one, because it's like, wait a second, if I have the right to privacy, there's probably a ton of other things that I can think of off, with 5 or 10 minutes time that I am not allowed to do, but that interpretation would seem to imply that I am allowed to do.
Yeah, I think sometimes what happens in law is you have an outcome and then you're trying to make it work within the system. Mm-hmm. So I think that probably what they started with was that we're trying to figure out how to make this okay.
Yeah.
How do we make this okay? We're the Supreme Court. This came to us. We know what we want to do. We know what we think is right. Mm-hmm. How do we do that without going outside of our actual band of power?
Yeah. This was, so I had a college class about this, and it discussed basically legislating from the bench. And this is one of the things that we talked about, as well as the integration of schools, which it's been a long time, but like the legality of it was not totally clear. And there was a push for civil rights that came from 9 people on the Supreme Court that might not have passed in the Arkansas legislature, for instance. And we can talk about abortion after this, but the question that we've asked ourselves is like, who gets to make these decisions? It actually doesn't make abortion illegal at all. What it does is it says that the Constitution of the United States of America does not guarantee your right to have one. And then if the people in your state vote,
each
that
state gets to make their own legislation, which is interesting because I think if you had control of the Senate and the Congress and the president, couldn't you pass a federal law? Because the Supreme Court did this from the bench. You said it's very well. If you get rid of Roe v. Wade, what defaults to, it's state by state, and the state makes their own laws for abortion. But that isn't to say that the federal government is not allowed to make a law about abortion. There just isn't one. And so the states have to figure it out on their own.
Correct. It seems, and I'm not an expert, that we have a broken legislature, which is we've got all these executive orders. Like, the legislature is supposed to write the laws of the land, and they're supposed to be far more broad spanning than the ones protected by the Constitution.
Yeah, well, I think the problem is that because these are elected officials, you are very aware that you're on the record. And so you know that if you vote for something that the people that voted you in dislike, then you're just going to get voted out. And so that's how it's supposed to work. You're supposed to represent your people. But what that results in is people are very partisan. And so if you have a Senate and a Congress and a president that aren't aligned, there's a lot of veto ability built into our government, specifically on purpose.
But there's been totally Democrat-controlled presidencies and houses and senates at the same time. I don't know exactly, but I believe that the filibuster's probably gotten in the way before. There's a lot of ways to be obstructive in the legislature. And
even in the Supreme Court justice instance, a justice died while Obama was president, and they kept saying, no, stall, this, that. Like, I mean, if you were following the spirit of the law, Obama would have picked that justice.
Gorsuch?
But letter of the law, they found a way to avoid that because of how partisan our government is or has become.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's a shame when a one-term president gets 3 Supreme Court justices. Like, there is a little bit of randomness of deaths and retirements, but there was certainly one that should have gone to Obama.
Well, this is the other thing I was actually thinking about with this. It is interesting because judges, I assume, if you care tremendously about your beliefs being on the bench after you're gone could purposely time their retirement a bit better. But it seems like the Supreme Court justice way of operating is just ride it out for as long as you possibly can.
Yeah, I don't know how this is going to affect RBG's legacy.
Poorly.
But
it's going to affect it poorly.
she could have left. And it was
for a while.
It was clear that she was very old, you know, that a Republican could win, or maybe she didn't think so.
No, I think it's pretty, even from people that are fans of hers, I think it's pretty populist understanding is that it was a bit of hubris there to just keep saying, I'm going to live and I'm the best judge for this. And even if I get replaced by someone with similar beliefs, they'll do worse. So it's important that I keep doing this no matter how old I get.
Yeah. So, so that's there's a legal thing. I have limited understanding of the legality. The philosophy thing we've talked
She was
about.
87.
Yeah.
Not like it was a surprise.
Yeah.
I don't know how long she thought she was going to make it. I just looked it up.
So the legal thing I don't know a ton about. The philosophy I think is more interesting. A lot of slogans are being shouted out on both sides, and they're as usual, they're ridiculous. You know, my body, my choice. It's just like that defends every single crime that I could possibly consider. You know, it's my body. I'll choose where I fling it around. And of course, they would respond, "Well, you can't do that to someone else's body." To which I would say, "That's exactly the philosophical question."
The whole philosophical question
abortion.
is, when does a fetus become its own body instead of your body? Is it when the head breaches? You know, is it at a certain age for the fetus?
The inside-outside thing is, I don't think people will like where that leads. You know what I mean? So let's say that you have a baby. Just to give you an example, it's due February 1st. And then you get a checkup. It goes, actually, oh, look, this one's taking a little bit longer. It's probably going to be the 7th. On the 2nd, you're like, you know what? I'm not feeling this. Still my body, my choice. I'd like you to dismember this 7-pound, 8-ounce baby inside of me. Like, is that okay? My body, my choice? Or
I think some people are going to say yes. I actually don't think everyone's going to dislike that.
Then that person has to be willing on February. Oh, and he comes on the 4th. Are you willing? Okay, is it no longer my body, my choice? It's the literal 6-inch passage of the birth canal that confers personhood.
I think what happens on both sides of this argument is people start with, what do I want the philosophical belief to be? And then they go, how do I get there? So I actually don't think anybody is starting from a vacuum of, let's actually think through this bottom up. I think they go, I need abortion to be illegal, or I need abortion to be legal. And then they magic all their beliefs around it.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I think that's why the slogans are so crappy. I think it's like almost, I guess, every hot button issue, just watching people completely talk past each other. Like, my body, my choice does not address the fundamental objection to abortion, which is that this, for some people, has a soul or counts as a person legally, or like, that's the question that needs to be addressed. And I think my position on it is simply that it is not easy, not clear, tough to decide when. Trimesters are random fucking things. Like, pregnancies actually take a bit more, like 10 months. So dividing it up into 3, it's, you know, I guess you could still do it, but it's not a perfect 3-month or 14-week or whatever.
It does. I mean, it does also seem like all or nothing policy is probably not good, but that's what people discuss, if that makes sense. So like, well, what if she's raped? It's like, let's just make that clause. If that's, you know what I mean? Like, are there areas we could ever agree? And some people say no. Some people say, I don't care how it came about. You know, and other times I've seen is like, well, what if it's a pregnancy that puts the wife at extreme risk? Like, the pregnancy is not in the right place. I think it's called like an ectopic pregnancy. It's like, can we at least agree on this? Like, can we, you know what I mean? I wish there was more of a working together to figure out what is best for the world instead of a hard line, better words, like religious belief that can't be, you can't even make extenuating circumstances.
You know what's interesting? Instead of using those edge cases to start with common ground, those edge cases are often used to divide people as far as they can.
They're used to punch the other side.
What about in the case of race? Instead of like, yo, let's just. That's
what I'm saying. Can we
take one of these
can we just start with the easiest stuff? Like, if it's going to be guaranteed, the mom and baby are going to die.
How about a day before it's due? You know what I mean?
That's what I'm saying. Like, can't we come to some sort of legislative agreement that starts with the most extreme, not as a weapon to show how crazy the other side's absolute philosophy is, but instead just like, okay, if we let this go without surgery, everyone dies. Baby mom, we all know this. So that one, definitely, obviously clear. Okay, it's the day that it's meant to be due.
How about the day of conception? You know what I mean? How about plan B?
That's
like, how do we feel about this?
It's sad. I was going to say I'm disappointed or surprised, but I don't even know if that's accurate. I'm not surprised. It's just sad that that's not how we have the conversation by going, let's just go until we find one that we really do fundamentally disagree with. Instead, it's kind of people act like discussing with each other, especially because most people aren't legislators or judges. They act like even discussing socially is if you give someone an inch, they'll take a mile type thing. So they'll just dig their heels in and refuse to cede anything, even if they're being insane in the process. So yeah,
not being insane, because that is a value judgment. Just like not agreeing with what they agree with. They might actually agree. They might want to cede ground that they know they can't for the sake of their perfect logical argument, which is they say life. And again, life starts at conception. It's like, it's not about life. It was never about life. If I scratch my head, I kill a bunch of cells. Nobody cares. Like, it's never been about life. It's about personhood. And that's the question, is when does this thing's personhood, and I think it's about weighing personhoods, because obviously this baby or this fetus or whatever you want to call it is exacting in a lot of a pretty significant toll on its mother, who may or may not be thrilled with that. So it's a much more complicated issue than I see on social media. The slogans are stupid on both sides. And yeah, I don't know that I have a strong, clear take on the morality of it. Do you?
Well, a thing that I was thinking of, not in terms of morality, but just in terms of like, what is the actual impact of this, is so you don't have to get an abortion if you live in a state that allows abortions, right? So I'm going to assume if you're conservative living in a liberal state that's going to allow abortion, it's actually not going to really impact your life. Maybe it'll impact how you feel about your neighbors. And then if you live in a conservative state, you can travel. It's actually not illegal to just leave your state to get a medical procedure elsewhere. So the people this really affects are people who would want to get abortions, don't have the money to travel, and live in conservative states, which is just kind of sucks, I guess. Basically, it's like, let's pass a law that really only hurts the poor.
Oh, if I were a judge, I would not undo this, to be clear. Like, I'd like, maybe it shouldn't have happened in the first place, but I don't want this legislating from the bench. Like, I do think that there was some value to the status quo, especially given how sticky of a philosophical question this is.
Yeah, apparently, and again, you go, why? Nothing's ever been leaked from the Supreme Court before. It's always been when the Supreme Court announces the official opinion. Why is this happening? They're not going to change their mind because of public opinion, but people are hypothesizing it's because midterms are coming up. And so someone leaked this who is in favor of Roe v. Wade and is, liberal, so that we could get more elected officials to be Democrats. So maybe we can legislate this.
Maybe it'll galvanize the base. Yeah.
Legitimately, basically, because I think most people know elections are won in the U.S. not based on a changing of opinion, but based on who cares enough to show up. So they leak this in the hopes that people care enough to go vote to get people who will legislate this, not from the bench, but from the legislation.
Yeah. and just to be clear, if I had to come up with the stance, I would, if I were God of the United States of America, I'd probably, legally, I don't know. I won't even say God of the United States of America. I'll say morally, I would allow for abortions within the first trimester, but also I would acknowledge the sloppiness of that thinking. You know what I mean? And the imperfection of it. But yeah, that would probably be my moral stance.